Yesterday we looked at a map and talked about some important features of maps. What's the purpose of a map? What does a map do? What does a map do, Scotty?
It helps you find stuff, see how far stuff is, and helps you when you're lost.
Yeah, it's a picture of the earth or part of the earth, what parts you're looking at. And it helps us find things, figure out the best way to go, figure out how far something is. There's a lot of things that we can do with a map. Now, so a map is a flat picture, right? So what is this? A globe. Which one do you think would be a more accurate way to show the earth? A map or a globe? Why do you think a globe would be the more accurate way, Ansley?
Because it has the shape of the earth and it has all of the countries and nations.
Yeah. So the earth is shaped like a sphere, and a globe is also shaped like a sphere. So it's a more accurate way to show the earth because they're both shaped the same way. Why would a map be a little more easy to use than a globe might be, depending on where you were, what you were using it for? Why would we want to use a map instead of a globe sometimes, Scotty?
Because sometimes that shows the whole entire world. Sometimes you need to know what road to go.
Okay.
That doesn't show roads and like what back roads, what house
Yeah.
to get to,
Okay.
what grocery store.
Yeah, so a globe has the whole entire earth on it, and that so it can't have near as much detail as what a map could. So like you said, if you wouldn't know how to get on a particular back road to get someplace because it's not on a globe, it doesn't show that. What else?
It would, like, if you're trying to get to, like, a specific place, you gotta look all over the globe, and, like, it's hard to find because everything is so tiny.
Okay.
It's too big to carry around.
It's too big to carry around. That's a good point. That was one of the things I was thinking also. So very good points you made, Brayley.
Some people believe that the earth is flat, and it wouldn't be good if the earth was flat.
You're exactly right. Amy?
If you're going on a car trip, you won't have a globe.
Yeah. We can't carry a globe in our pocket, can we?
No.
We can't fold a globe up and put it in our glove box in the car. We don't have a globe on our phones like we do a map. Justice?
What would be so bad if the earth was flat?
And there'd be a lot of things, but we're not going to talk about those right now. But we will, okay? If you'll remind me, we'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, so a globe is a very important way to represent the earth, and it is more accurate than a map. But there's a lot of times that a map is much more convenient than a globe, and things that we would need a map for instead of a globe. But we're going to talk about some imaginary lines that are on this globe that helps us find some different things about the earth. So first of all, what does the earth do? What does the earth do in one day? What does the earth do?
It turns around and
Yeah, it turns or it rotates. How long does it take the earth to rotate all the way around? Justice?
Does it take, like,
Yeah, it takes 24 hours or one day for the earth to make one full rotation around. So the imaginary line that passes through the center of the earth between the North Pole and the South Pole that the earth rotates around is called the axis. Okay? The axis is what the earth rotates on. You can see on this globe. You can kind of tell where the axis might be based on where these knobs are. And that's what the earth rotates around. On this picture that you see, it's showing the North Pole. Where's the North Pole?
at the top?
Where's the North Pole?
The very top of the earth?
Yeah, it's the very top of the earth. It's the furthest north point on the earth. And how about the South Pole? How about the South Pole, Alexis?
The very top.
It's at the very bottom. It's the furthest point to the south on the globe. So the axis goes right down the center of the earth from the North Pole to the South Pole, and that's what the earth rotates around. Okay? Then there's another imaginary line. But in this time, instead of the line going from the North Pole to the South Pole, this line splits the earth in the center going around this way. Does anyone know what this line is called that splits the earth into the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere? Justice, do you know?
No, I was going to ask you a question.
Okay.
About
Okay.
does that mean that what they can dig like in the north,
Yes. The rotation in the earth is what causes daylight and then nighttime. Okay. Whichever side of the earth is rotated facing the sun is what has daylight. And then as the earth turns, then another part receives the daylight or the sunshine, and then the other side of the earth has the moonlight.
like so the sun doesn't move?
No, the sun does not move. The earth rotates around the sun. Okay, so back to this line right here that's splitting the earth between the northern part or the northern hemisphere and the southern part, the southern hemisphere. This is called the equator. Okay, so the equator is an imaginary line that runs around the center of the earth. And it's located, we're going to talk about these two words in just a minute. It's located at 0 degrees latitude. So there's two different ways or imaginary lines that go around the whole earth. If you look at this globe, you can kind of see these dotted lines running around and then up and down. And those lines help us to locate places on the globe. And they're called lines of latitude. And longitude. I want you to look at this word longitude. What do you notice the first word is in longitude? Long. If I look at this, it's long. That helps me remember that longitude are the lines that go up and down. They're long, they go up and down. And lines of latitude are the ones that go around the earth horizontally. Okay? That's not something you're going to have to remember, but that is stuff that you'll come in contact with later on. So at 0 degrees latitude, there's this line that goes around the center of the earth called the equator. And it splits the earth into the northern half or northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Okay? And so then there's also one more imaginary line. But this one runs from the North Pole to the South Pole. And it's at 0 degrees longitude, or long, because it goes up and down vertically. And its job is to separate the western hemisphere, the western half of the earth, from the eastern hemisphere, or the eastern half of the earth. I know that's a lot of new words. And that's all right. Don't stress over knowing the vocabulary, okay? The main thing that we need to know is that we've got to have the earth split up into some parts to make things easier to locate. It'd be really hard to locate different things if there was no reference point to which it needed to be broken into. So we've looked at how the earth rotates. What's that imaginary line through the center of the earth that the earth rotates around? Axis. The axis is what the earth rotates around. Then we have the line going around the center of the earth, going horizontally, 0 degrees latitude because it's going horizontally. And that's called the equator. Very good. Now there's something else to know about the equator. The equator, the further you get away from the equator, the cooler the surface temperature gets. So the equator is the part that would be closest to the sun. So what happens, the closer to the sun you are, what happens to the temperature?
Hotter.
Yeah, it gets hotter. So the equator has the highest surface temperature on Earth, or it's the hottest place. So as you move away, the further away you get from the equator, what happens to the temperature?
Colder.
It gets colder, exactly. Yes, ma'am, Mansley?
I remember learning that like a long time ago, like about how like the farther you are away.
Exactly. The further you are from the equator, the cooler it gets. That's why the North Pole is really cold, right? And South Pole the same way. They're really cold because they're the furthest points away from the equator, which is the closest part to the sun. Okay, so we know that we talked about the imaginary line that the earth rotates around being the axis. This imaginary line through the center of the earth going horizontally at 0 degrees latitude is called the equator. And the equator is the closest point to the sun. And then we have the imaginary line that's separating the east and the west. It's running long or longitude. And what's that one called? What's that called, Ansley?
The prime meridian.
Very good. The prime meridian. You're exactly right. The prime meridian goes from the North Pole to the South Pole, and it's at 0 degrees longitude. And it separates the east and the west. The equator separates the, what are those two directions?
North and south.
The north and the south. Very good. What's the northernmost point of the Earth's axis? The North Pole. Very good. What's the southernmost point of the Earth's axis, Scotty?
South Pole.
South Pole. Perfect. Which one runs around the center of the Earth? What runs around the Earth? The equator. Very good. And what happens as you travel away from the equator to the temperature? What happens, Amy?
It gets colder.
It gets colder. The further you move away from the equator, the colder it gets. Okay, on your questions today, I want you to make sure that you refer back to the picture that you have that shows you how the equator runs, how the prime meridian runs, the axis that goes through the center of the earth. And it tells you down here underneath each one of your diagrams, it tells you exactly where the equator runs, that it's at 0 degrees latitude because it's running horizontally or around the earth. And it tells you that the prime meridian is at 0 degrees longitude or long because it's running up and down. Okay, so you're going to have a question about that. Go back and refer to the information that you have to keep yourself from getting confused, okay? Yes, ma'am, Cadence. In just a second. Yes, sir?
Why is the South Pole colder than the North Pole? Aren't they the same amount away from
They
each
are the
other?
same amount of distance away, yes. Because the equator is exactly in the center.
So why is the South Pole colder?
It's not. Yep, it's split. The equator is exactly in the middle. That's why it's at 0 degrees latitude. And then the prime meridian is exactly in the center, going long or longitude. Okay? Other questions about these globe lines? Yes, ma'am.